Hi, good evening. I'm Michelle White, Senior Curator. Thanks for being here tonight. I think there's an Astros game going on, but it doesn't seem to be affecting this crowd, so thank you. I'm so happy you're here to join us. We're thrilled to have the renowned poet and author Ariana Reines here with us tonight from New York for her very first reading in Texas. That's okay. Ariana was just telling me how polite and friendly people are, so that's a Texas welcome. Devereaux Fortuna will be giving a proper introduction in just a minute, but first I'd like to say what an honor it's been to collaborate with you for our publication. Ariana is a contributor to our book for the exhibition Niki de Saint Phalle in the 1960s. And I'll go off script here to say that we were so excited and thrilled when your essay, which is thoughtful and poignant, came in that day. And I know Joseph Newland, who runs our publication, we were absolutely giddy with excitement and truly feel your essay rounds out a book for an artist who is infinitely complex and surprising, and we're really honored you could be a part. She will be reading tonight excerpts from that essay, Inside the Empress, along with selections from her widely celebrated collection, A Sand Book, which I have here. For those of you that might be interested in purchasing this book along with the exhibition catalog, our bookstore has kindly agreed to be open through 8:30 tonight. So before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. If you could please wear face masks while you are inside the museum, and if you could please silence your cell phones. Ariana is excited to take your questions at the end of the program. Just hold your questions until then, and Tony will come around with a microphone. This program is also being recorded and will be available on demand at the Menil's YouTube channel in the coming weeks. Our next program, which I hope you can join, is a two-part lecture with the author Hilton Als that will take place November 2nd and 4th, and I'll say please register in advance. We're expecting a lot of people. Now I'd like to invite Houston-based poet Devereaux Fortuna to introduce our speaker this evening. She is a PhD candidate in creative writing and literature at the University of Houston, and she's the poetry editor for Gulf Coast Journal. She also teaches creative writing workshops at the University of Houston and writers in the school. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Hello, can everyone hear me all right? Good evening. My name is Devereaux Fortuna. I want to thank the Menil and the University of Houston Creative Writing Program for making this event possible. It is an honor to be here to introduce Ariana Reines. I will begin with a few lines from Reines' most recent poetry collection, A Sand Book. The sun was setting over a great confusion and a great gray grief, which seemed to be the acid ocean itself, pocked with bullet holes and sobbing in secret at the source. I was willing to tarry somewhere. I wanted to do it for love. Tonight, you will be moved, as I have been, by instances across Reines' works that tend linguistic junctures where there is, as she writes in A Sand Book, serrated proof that the invisible world was real. The serration of proof, decorative edge that's left or made by damaging contact, calls to mind the gorgeous likeness of Reines' A Sand Book to painterly intensifications of surface contact in a maximalism of textural savor. Reines also writes, "To paint is manual, as Thomas might have known had he painted, to conflate the eye with the hand, in favor of tactile proximity, to consolidate with the burl of material. Moments from Reines' other texts, The Cow, Coeur de Lion, and Mercury, help me understand a tenderness I feel shared between Reines' poetry and works of Niki de Saint Phalle. In The Cow, Reines writes, "Putty, the shape of the hole that needs plugging." In Coeur de Lion, it made me nervous that in order for words on a page to have power, I had to be close. I had to be close. And in Mercury, a reader is given permission to keep the book by the bed for your head and arms to weigh heavy on molting white clouds. In these lines, I conceive the malleable material language can be as one concedes to elasticity. I remember amorous relation with language. I recover the obliging energy a poetics of somatic emphasis miraculously enables me to sustain. Ariana Reines is an award-winning author and performer whose works continue to redefine multiple disciplinary fields. She has written the poetry collections The Cow, winner of the 2006 Alberta Prize, Coeur de Lion, Mercury, and A Sandbook, winner of the 2020 Kingsley Tufts Award. Reines is also a playwright. Her 2009 play Telephone won 2 Obie Awards. She has translated works by Charles Baudelaire and Jean-Luc Hennig, and she has performed her works at the Whitney Museum, LAX Art, Modern Art in London, and elsewhere. Like the topographical volutions of Niki de Saint Phalle in works that obstruct gravity's downward exertion on substance, or as her arrays of unset plaster stifle instruments of punition. Reines' magnetically hypostasizing phrasings mercifully animate language's material effluence. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Ariana Reines.
Hi. I just want to say thank you so much to the Menil and to all of you for being here. I'm so excited to be here for so many reasons. This is only my second time ever in Texas. I spent 2 nights in Dallas 11 years ago to attend a cult wedding. And I really didn't get to experience a lot about this place on that particular trip, although that was kind of interesting. And I just want to say that this exhibition is absolutely extraordinary. How many people in the room have seen the show? Oh, good. So, like 3/4 of you. It's so stunning and overwhelming to get to see this body of work so beautifully curated. This is a body of work that it's viscerally powerful, it's deeply sophisticated, it is moving, it's in motion, and it's got a majority to it. It's got a willingness to be major. And that's what I felt was missing from that New York opportunity. It wasn't showing the majority of this artist, the magnitude of what she intended and what she achieved. And I was terrified by this commission. I've told Michelle and I've told Lauren that this was the most terrifying commission to write on art that I've ever received. And deeply intimidating, because Because many of the things that one has to speak about are unfinished. They're not dead in history, you know? Of course, it's frightening to write about a living artist because you don't want to do them wrong. And if they're dead, I guess they can't tell you fucked it up. But so much of this legacy, I feel, still needs to be brought out. And this exhibition does so much to make that happen, and the gorgeous publication and the incredible essays in it. And you know, it was a lockdown experience too. And I guess I just want to say, like, it's so special to get to physically be here with all of you. And I want to thank you for being here with your bodies and your friends. I didn't know how writing would go in lockdown. And many of you, I'm sure, are writers and artists and have had different experiences of your own practice during this strange time. And the treasure that we get to enjoy when we finally get to come together around these things is something that I forgot about. I forgot the pleasure, the treasure of it. And I've just been so grateful to get to enjoy that here and with the community at the University of Houston and Roberto Tejada's class and the amazing Devereux Fortuna and all the conversations that I've had the opportunity to have. So that is my thank you. I'm going to read just one poem from a sandbook, and then I'll read to you from my essay on Niki, and then I'll go back into a sandbook and read a sequence, and then we'll have a conversation. Does that sound great? Also, welcome to Scorpio season. Yes. And I hope you all handled that full moon okay. That was pretty intense, so yeah. Son of a jar. There are things not found in books, or perhaps you have been reading the wrong ones. Pulling down from a high shelf the fabulous album, only to find it writhing with worms. Nothing touches me until I permit it. Not even kindness can disturb my sleep. I have been to caves. Sure, I have lived in them. I lay on the mosses in Valhalla, but what difference would it make to you? There are nectars hidden in your body. Suck your own tongue. So, I've never read this essay in public before, I wrote it around the time of my father's birthday, so it's just over a year ago. And it was just crazy realizing that it's like, is everybody's sense of time fucked up, or is it just me? No, we're all, like, there's something going on there, for sure. The essay is called Inside the Empress. I really recommend this book. Available in the shop until 8:30. Oh, and you know what? Just want to make sure I keep track of time. Okay. My eyelids were flitting like sparrows and leaking liquid all over me. I say they were like sparrows because they fluttered like the little birds that betoken the presence of the Holy Spirit in old paintings, and because the sensation in their fretfulness was that my eyes were not eyes, and most of all, that they did not belong to me. They gave me to imagine the motes of light and birds conjuring sunlight into a prism of such intensity, it transfigured the little girl who would become, while still a girl, Joan of Arc. And I'm going to go out of the essay and say, the films of Niki shooting, her haircut is like kind of Joan of Arc-y, right? It always makes me think of Joan of Arc. And like the nights that too once tilted within me other histories, which survive down to today as metaphors for things my body does, roared their roaring feeling through my blood. My heart was God's vessel beckoning for my attention. Would I too be called to high deeds? But without the kind of pain that smashes the brain to smithereens, shatters mirrors, and resolves right angles into the curvaceous caverns on whose walls, deep in a France that hides behind the France we know, art began. How could I ever learn the discipline to carry a vision all the way through to its achievement? But I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about her. I saw my father grinning like a worm. I saw him on Instagram. His birthday had just passed. I didn't call him, as he never calls me, and a small squirt of love rose in my guts and fell back down and died in the place where it began. Unmolested and safe inside my freedom of expression, I maintained my argument against him. Not because he harmed me the way, at 11, her father hurt her, but because he abandoned me for his religion. He left me alone with my mother. Some of us, as we climb out of the hole of our youth, especially when we are first beginning, have a need to make works or to construct situations in which it is possible to kill our parents. I think many artists would agree with this, including those of us who never suffered nervous breakdowns, were not born rich, or raised to find husbands, including those of us who never wanted literally to put a bullet into anything, except perhaps our own brains. Some of us, as we are climbing out of the hole of our youth, especially find it necessary to do violence to the tradition that seemed to be killing us the whole length of our education. The noble aggression of a cunning youth full of nothing but herself, identifying her target and proving herself against an entrenched adversary, is a story as old as the Marasa, David, and Odysseus, and as enduring as Billy the Kid and Godfather 2. In certain women, it runs very deep. I'm talking about how Niki de Saint Phalle staged painting in order to put bullets in her past, used her considerable beauty only just enough, organized a good old-fashioned American cowboy showdown, and had the wisdom to move on to brighter climes once her score had been settled. To clear space for the worlds living through her, she would have to assassinate important aspects of her education, certain looming figures that would otherwise keep her in the corner forever. Doubtless it is a privilege to carry out these killings in aesthetic, in symbolic space. I understand this need and the aggression and insanity of her youth because my body, even without her nobility, her aristocracy, her beauty, or the particular damage her father inflicted on her, I understand why she broke plates
and fired guns into a plane in which time and space were one. And the assertion of her existence had to be made explicit, both in the timelessness of art's histories and in the eyes of the people assembled to watch her take aim, in figure-hugging white, a model doing things with the gaze that had not yet been done, and causing her assemblages to bleed and change, kind of cartoony and funny, like ketchup in a grindhouse movie, but also carnivalesque and chevaleresque on account of her excellent aim. When looking at what she made from the outside, the broken china and bullet-written patriarchs of her earlier work seem almost to justify the exuberant, immense joy the nanas would evince, to go from arranging shattered pieces on a flat plane to shooting textured assemblages that would paint themselves in getting shot, to the mosaic convexities and unabashed joy of the style we really know her for. I mean, you almost see Nicki Minaj in them. I have to ask what it is in my bad training, my own ingrained misogyny, that needs a woman broken, enraged, or in an out-and-out duel with her overlords in order to appreciate the courage it took for Niki de Saint Phalle to refer us to a deeper beauty and an experience of vastness that was no longer about a woman's being looked at, but rather about our being encompassed by the feminine itself, like the long, starry body of the Egyptian goddess Nuit, whose very flesh is the entire vault of heaven, the universe itself. I think I'll stop there. There's more. I'm stopping there only because I have to give you some poetry, or else I'll fuck this up, and I can't fuck it up. I can't go home in shame. If I can't go home in shame, that means I won't leave. That means I'll never leave, and I'm just going to perseverate. That's not good either. So I'm going to read to you from the section of a sandbook called Gizzard. And I'm going to read it kind of a good clip, meaning don't worry about the words too much. Just kind of let it be a flow. You all okay? Okay, I heard that there was no alcohol, so I'm sorry. The first poem in this section, Emily Dickinson wrote for me. 11:22. A bullet's like a planet orbiting the brain. No heart will go unpunished, though it never enter in. For though it didn't enter, yet it did, and does, and shall. For though we only saw it, it is moving through us still. There was no way to put my arms around it, but it was moving through me all the way down into the dark. I learned how to say thank you in the language, closed my heavy bag, and saw the sunrise. The same songs were playing there. Green figs went rose, then luscious to rot. Parody of feelings circulated freely wherever you went. Magnificently painted woman under her black cloth, leading her child by the hand. Men in white caftans leading their wives. The beauty of money shining in a young eye. The beauty of reciprocating gazes. The rare gentleness of a woman's eye upon herself. What does money mean in heaven? Jupiter raping Danae as a shower of gold. I live by the force of invention. It and you, literally, everything I have. tea bag bloating like a body. The tea would now slide down her throat in an atmosphere of cockroaches and white alligators, and the withdrawal of money and sex, tawny like the two bobbins toward the left of her guts, which turned to tighten the last of her, the last of the substance that generates soul stuff without which she cannot live. In Greece now, rocks upon the shore in the form of arches part way into the crimson water, walking along the strand in Naxos, the great, relaxed curve of time, easing toward a strange, open square of white marble, the ruin. There was something Californian about this kind of money, like a strand of fish excrement snaking through the palms, coming through this opal night to her without her pills. It would be a smoothness, a Jesus smoothness, to come languishing now, to look languishingly at her, a rough woman from a century of rough women, whose ascent was won violently, won at great length by the state, their husband, down to the very last one of them, who dared, like a nymph refusing to marry, to try and turn herself into a tree. Small cellulite of the upper arms, maintaining intactness of the silly putty genital. I'd rather eat than fuck. I'd rather read than quote unquote make love, yearning to turn from symmetry. My eye wants to goggle. I was looking at his sleeping countenance, as steadfast as one dead. The moon was rotting. It's been months since I squeezed white pus from a zit, but last night, after falling asleep with Jay in front of the Bukowski documentary, I did it to 2. Was I still bleeding? Decided not to replace the loaded tampon, removed for sex and drying like a dead animal beside the bed. My sheer red panties were on the small side and rather chafy. Jay's been working out. Really? Long arms the color of almond paste and hard, belly of an unaccustomed hardness. He gets results, I guess. I need to shit, then drink a glass of nettle tea and clean the cat box. New York's gonna be the end of me. I had an idea of symmetry, bordering on theology, that dictated I consume darkness in proportion to the world's. The many philosophies celebrating equanimity, kindness, and happiness propagated by saints and sages from Tibet and Vietnam and other places felt as yet incommensurate to my rage and triteness, my unslakable sorrow, and the narrow idea of victory I apparently shared, my struggles aside, with even the worst men of my culture. But in a way, I had to become an idiot, at least partially, in order for what happened to me, I will relate it, to happen, or so I tell myself. English contrives many routes to the unseen, but turns out to be an awkward conveyor. I keep thinking I won't have been able to describe what I've yet to set down in a place you might find it. Description's old-fashioned. I know it. But in this case, there was no other way. Boomers. They taught us the world was ending, but they were wrong. They hardly taught us anything, hiding themselves in the cantaloupe light at the witching hour, our parents, badly harmed, desperate but unkind, clinging to whatever they could remember from the war, and to the phrase before the war, which they carried into the next country with a couple of coins, a stick of furniture, hairs sprouting from their tough old leg. He understood there to be feeling in it, but he did not know what feeling was. The heart has brain cells in it, my lover said. Since before I reached majority, my country has been at war. My adulthood entered war in parallel to the decline of her art, which could not be protested, only soaked like gray water down the flocked back of a stone maiden. Hypnosis of sense and of forms, gag teeth, make no sound, poker chips, chips you can't eat. I'll put my money on the crystal children. Your own career from LAX to El Pollo Loco, like all truly natural things, at last completed in the dark and in silence, unacclaimed. You'll need to clear your schedule if you want to see this. I'm going to be made a mockery of, and I'm going to be misunderstood within myself. The show is about to start. Okay, now. I'm doing it now, great beauty, whipping me with your little wing, with your famous little wing. You play about the edges of the wound, castigating us for our lack of faith. Lack of faith, you keep saying, is worse than want of discipline. He kept his room clean. He was kind of the most beautiful man I'd ever seen. When you turn away, the evening bevels out the sides of your face, the wind massages your worser scars, and now the banker has released your funds, a tower of people goes up in flames. Was desire just another way of doing violence to another without appearing to? The real way things need to go was averse to a lie I had to tell. Dirty laundry dangling over the heart of the city. I was running away in the world, unfathered, unmothered, my beloved far away. Arms were a cave, you could hide in a fuck, birds supping on the worm. The sun had not yet set, it lit up an aged woman's upper lip, organizing itself at length about the gin glass. I just want to say I never read this section of this book in public, so it's very groovy and weird to be having this experience with you, and thank you for being the first. Old MacDonald had a farm. Do people still sing that to children? Okay. Not a touch. Old MacDonald had a farm. Great sadness having been so long entranced, the open sign blinks on and off, dark-eyed person telling a beautiful alphabet. My sex is in me and my computer, stretched into bands of white elastic light about the sun. I tried to write it down. A peacock's fan had opened in my eye. It brought me lovers I couldn't keep, and an intimation of evil, like scent or the surface of opaque water roughened by a wind in the dark. I addressed my addressee by the wrong name. He responded without acknowledging my error. I invited myself over. He said, "Come." I had been handed a blinding blonde baby centaur at a wedding at an evil university. Moving around the world that fast left little need for drugs. Between sleep and wakefulness, estrangement and one's sandals moving along a ground, one kind of food, then another kind, neutral declensions of what passes over Wi-Fi, and nobody could even remember what that was short for. Gizzard. I was in a bar in Albuquerque. I was going to have to sleep with somebody. I was going to have to choose between two men. It wasn't going to work with both of them. This blue-eyed man was very drunk, on leave from the army, big German bones in his face. He was telling me about his sex career. I didn't particularly want him. There were, however, things I wanted him to tell me. He'd been at Mount Sinjar after the massacres there. He wanted to tell me about his marriage. I'm impotent now, he said, but I have chemicals. He was an army chemist, but he was referring to Cialis, which he said he preferred to Viagra. and having never yet fucked a geezer on pills, I wasn't totally uncurious how it all might go down. But this other man was supposed to be showing up any minute on his motorcycle, who was the hottest person in town I'd been able to find with my phone. I'd been living in a trailer on my friend's land. I had taken refuge with the lesbians and their dogs. I'd been dealing with a creep. I'd hardly seen a man, and going on 2 months, I just had to know if they were still there. Things had gotten to that point. Through great confusion must we make our way. A rare people practicing their ancient religion had recently been massacred by the Islamic State on the mountain that was sacred to them. This man had been there, but I'd grown too drunk to engage him further. It would have meant going to his room, and I didn't want to. I went with the other man, the one I wanted, who didn't know anything about what I wanted to know. I'd seen the iridescence on the surface of spilled oil. I'd seen rainbows. Until the fan spread across my vision, I had mistaken peacocks for decoration. Were they secretly Quetzalcoatl, the phoenix, guardians at the gates of Eden? Were the gates of Eden depicted in the amber gates that partly enclosed the many eyes in their tails? Were they allegories for the heavenly panopticon, or answers to the feminine yearning to feel seen? And what about their ugly voices, shameless horniness, and the legend they copulate as follows? The male weeps, the female licks his tears. So I'm going to read you one last poem, and then we can hang out a little, talk. We good on time? Great. Arena. Because that light was not like the others, making us seem to be becoming a place, and because on a traffic island the sun had filled me, and because my mother was crazy, and because she was sometimes sane, and because I was in love and then I wasn't in love anymore, and because I was hungry, and because I needed to party, and because I was grieving, and because I had studied the Dust Bowl, the architecture at Delphi, Judaic and Islamic legends of Moses, Midianite theology, the history of Haiti, Aryan horsemen of ancient Iran, the collapse of Sumerian agriculture, Kundalini yoga, Alan Savory's and competing theories on desertification reversal, ancient and contemporary methods for ruminant grazing, grasslands and myths of grasslands, those Hopi stories that can be found in books, Roman haruspicy, Hellenistic astrology, the life of the Marquis de Sade, 1 or 2 novels, 1 or 2 volumes of poetry, Bulgarian choral singing, elements of contemporary sculpture, certain Gnostic scriptures, my own appetite, and because you can pay a professional to cleanse you of demons with a chicken egg, and because the air filled first with the odor of cheap men's cologne, and then of human excrement over warming Pop-Tarts, and because one morning in Santa Monica, a woman emerging from a store was heard to say, "They don't have guns in the toy store." To which her man replied, "I know." He was seated beside a child. "We'll get it in another toy store," said the man. And because an ugly incense was emanating from House of Intuition, and because Kabir wore a peacock feather in his cap and Krishna had one in his turban, and because King Solomon brought peacocks to Kiyim in a boat back from Tarshish, and because I fell down sobbing over a beaded cloth, and because what I had for so long failed to see, what I had ignored, mistaking it for ornament, was information hiding in plain sight, and because there was no way to touch what was converging on us, and because once there were oil pits near Arderica and a pitch spring on Zacynthus, and because Iris was the messenger of the gods I'd forgotten, and because the iridescence in the peacock was due to a complex photonic crystal, and because that crystal was silica, and so for the most part was sand, and likewise the stones to which desolate people increasingly communicated their wishes, and because glass was melted sand, and Johnny Cash was attacked by an ostrich, and because pens used to be made of feathers, and because Chopin and George Sand had been miserable on Mallorca, and because there were dust storms on Mars and sandstorms in China, and Israel was investing heavily in anti-desertification efforts, and because Papa Doc had shorn Haiti's mountains of trees, and when dust from Azerbaijan blew into Tbilisi, I lay with a nihilist in a fenced-in woods, and when strange lights appeared at the height of the spruces, there was dust on our tongues. And because I navigated by the pine cone in my skull, same as everybody else, and because a bird had alighted on the lectern of Bernie Sanders, and Mozart kept a sparrow as a pet, and because the mute son of Kenzaburo Oe learned speech from records of birdsong, and because of the bird friends of Odin and Massa, and because the gizzards of fowl were iridescent, and likewise the pearl, and likewise the viral unicorn frappuccino, and because Big Sur was on fire, and a hot wind was blowing over the Henry Miller Library, and because in Paradise, California, people burned in their cars, and because the bullets kept flying, and because the relentless spread of stupidity was allegorized in Flaubert's novels by grains of sand, and because idiocy came down onto Baudelaire on the wind of a wing, and because the less we could agree, the more it seemed we were revolving into a gem. Thank you. So I guess now we're going to have a chat.
Yes, and I have a mic here, so if you just raise your hand, I'll bring it over.
Thank you, Ariana. There were two possible questions I was going to ask you, but I thought, especially given the last poem, which you read so powerfully, and given that you work with practicing artists and contemporary artists, if you think about your writing practice in ways that might relate to some kind of mark making or assemblage, what would be the visual material aspect of your work that you most identify with?
Oh gosh, that's such a great question, and I haven't thought about it at all. I mean, I think about books as objects, like I think about their materiality and their solidity and like visual impact, but I feel more like I could have been a dancer or a musician if I'd come from a happy family. And so I sort of feel like where I'm trying to go is music. Did I fuck up that answer?
No, not at all. My pause is simply because, especially now having seen the Niki de Saint Phalle show, I wonder if, then I'll go to the second part of the question, which was going to be, and we've had a version of this question, you and I have had the opportunity to talk, which is this idea of the art writing that you were involved with sort of involves a dividing of the self. And in the piece, it's when you say, but I'm not writing about myself, I'm writing about her. And that's when it goes into the speculative mode.
Yeah.
And so maybe you could talk a little bit about that, because I see that as the place in which even the art writing becomes a kind of material practice.
You taught me so much about what I'm doing with these pieces through our conversations these last few days, and I'm so grateful to you because it's crystallized for me thanks to this conversation. And I didn't realize that it's what I do, but it is what I do. I think that when I write about an artist, I think it's an erotics, and somehow what I'm looking for in myself is how I would love them as a friend and how I would talk with them as a colleague if I could, you know? And that means giving myself the right to go as deeply into myself as their work takes me. And when I was in my early 20s, I worked in galleries and I really wanted to do art writing because so many of my favorite poets had done it. And it was like this, artists have much better parties than writers, and there's more money, and it was just like a thing that Baudelaire had done, and John Ashbery had done, and Eileen Myles did, and all these people who they had sort of educated their spirit through apprenticing themselves to art as poets, like with the intention of being poets, you know what I mean? And I love scholarship and I respect it. It's just not my profession. And so when I was first writing about art, I was sort of faking an authoritative voice. And I felt like I was faking, But when you're super young and you're figuring out your gift, you want to try every different thing. And I just thought, I can do this. And maybe I can do that. Maybe I can do that other thing too. And some people maintain that lability or whatever. But I got this feeling that I had to watch it with that fake tone that I was using. That fakely knowledgeable tone. It was like I was fucking 23. I didn't know anything, I was just copying what an essay about artwork sounds like. And so I stopped writing about art. And I was also irritated by the servility, financially and otherwise, that artists are forced into relation with vis-a-vis art. It's like, oh, hey, bitch, why don't you come over here, explain this, we'll pay you next to nothing, and then it'll make it more saleable, because you'll give people something to say. You'll give the gallery girl something to say. You'll give, you know what I'm saying? Am I being too rude? I can't tell if you're looking at me with death eyes above those masks. It was a bad economics, a single artwork goes, just the economics of it were messed up, and the writing was clearly subservient to that situation. And I thought, this isn't healthy for me. And so I stopped writing about art for 5 years or so. And then when I started getting invitations again, I gave myself the task to make it a meeting of equals and to approach it, to challenge myself to approach the work as an artist myself. And so the poems that I've written in relation to artworks and bodies of work by artists, the poems that I've written inspired by, which we talked about at U of H the other day, and some of you are here, and then the texts, the prose pieces that I write, I really try to meet a body of work, but also a person to the extent that I can feel that person with all my sincerity. And that's as close as I can get to being with them in their studio. And it makes me feel it's very challenging to do, because you don't want it, you can ruin it. You don't want to write, you want to deliver the artwork. If you're just talking about what it makes you think of in your own personal life, you're not being fair to the job. And yet, we all bring our personal life to art. That's, what else do we bring to it? I don't know, our guts and our situation, the day that we've had. And so it's risky, and I can't claim that it could always work or that it would always work, but it's been a rewarding for me, challenging way to approach the opportunity. And it's I get to spend time with this person. I get to be with this energy. And I feel so lucky for that, So I want to make good on that time and give them something from me, too.
question about the creation of a sandbook. I was really struck by the length of it, especially in already a pretty sizable body of work. The other day at UH, you had said how the first time you thought it was finished, it was half its length, which is 200 pages. I guess I'm wondering, in making the book, I guess, did you have like an arc of like everything that's written in it was written for a sandbook, or did you find that like, oh, something that you had written before found new life in a sandbook and got integrated in? I guess I'm just wondering about the secret life of the book and of the poems.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, for example, the poem that I read in Roberto's class the other night, Armorica, that poem came out in one day, on the day of the Parkland massacre, when I thought I was editing the finished book. But I felt that it had to go in because one of the motifs that moves through the book is the bullet and the gun. And one of the things that the shocks that I think this book is registering is what they used to call bystanderism or complicity, or the experience of dealing with state violence, white supremacist violence, war, also child gun violence, when the bullet isn't literally going into you. What is that still doing to us, I guess? So I felt like that has to go in. You know what I mean? And it was other things like that, you know, like it was like it kept coming after I thought I kind of had it. But I spent the last 2 years working on the book focusing almost entirely on the structure. So the order of the sections, the order within the sections, and lots and lots of poetry that I wrote didn't go into the book, if that's answering part of your question. So it wasn't like everything I wrote in my notebook I just dumped in to a sandbook. It had to have several helpers, like several figurative and almost visionary helpers, in order for me to make it through such a complex work, because, you know, the book is trying to do too many things at once, in a way, to hold together, and I knew that. So one of the figures that carried me through the book was the peacock. And other figures also came, you know, in a sense it's a bird book. It's a book about drying out or desertification. It's a book about the sense of the visionary desert, like the place where one goes to have visions, but also going through the desert culturally, socially, spiritually, which I felt was happening not just to me, but to all of us through this time. And so I used poems that came from experiences that I'd consider almost trash, like a moment on the subway, or like seeing two sheltered-looking white boys who looked like they'd just moved into my neighborhood, and the weird feeling that gave me. I used these little poems, I put these things in because I felt like, or poems that are like tweets that I couldn't send, literally. There's a couple of them in there, because there was something going on to, like, in and with and to consciousness itself. My consciousness, but I think to consciousness itself as things were digitizing more and more. And I felt like I needed to combine poems like the more gangbusters poem that I finished with these moments of like a snag in the mind, where the mind is almost caught between devices. It's like, do I tweet this? Do I write it in my notebook? Do I text it to my partner? You know what I mean? And what are the stakes? How are the stakes different? And how does the charge change? Depending on those things, and those little waverings in my mind were things I became curious about, because it was like, well, this is completely uninteresting stuff when it comes to drama or story or something, but what was happening to our minds, you know? Something. And getting used to all these changes, your mind changes too. And I felt like the roughness of poetry, this, like Devereux quoted this line, this serrated proof that the invisible world was real. And part of what I wanted to do was show different aspects of the invisible world, both kind of ordinary daily consciousness where you're just like, ugh, like, do I tweet this? Do I write it down? Like, is this important? Why am I noticing it? To more kind of kaleidoscopic, visionary experiences. And so figuring out how to put it together, it took me 2 years. And through those 2 years, new things came. I guess that was a longer answer than you might have bargained for. Did I answer your question? Good, good.
Hi, thank you for being here. Thank you for the reading. I've been a fan of yours for a while, and a fan of Niki de Saint Phalle's as well. I didn't know about this event until a couple hours ago when I saw your Instagram post, so I'm glad I found out about it. Following kind of like where you ended up in that last response, and I intend this to be a sort of open-ended question, the relation of the occult, the esoteric, the supernatural to your writing, however, wherever you want to go with that.
Thank you. Thank you for that beautiful question, and thank you for reminding me how important it is to post these things on social media, because sometimes I'm a little bitch and I don't do it. Now that I'm so old, I have learned that poetry is a prophetic art form for all of us who practice it. And it's uncanny to recognize how, and maybe you have to be a little old to like recognize it, but you'll see that the things that you wrote down predicted your future, sometimes in scarily accurate ways. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately because I just recorded the audiobook for this, and it comes out November 23rd, unfortunately not before the day of mourning, Thanksgiving, after, whatever. Having like gone through that process, I was just like, holy shit, this book is also predicting to like the nano level certain elements of my present life. And if I had been taught that poetry is a prophetic art, I might have been a little more careful about what I wrote down. You know? But I've always been interested in this idea with poetry of its capacity to write the future. I always was curious about that idea because I feel like prose is something that comes after experience. But poetry conjures experience. And every book I've ever written has changed my life. And you'll notice I'm staying away from more occult things. Like I'm just talking about writing things down, which it turns out is already a very occult thing to do. And I want to put more curiosity and attention into what it is I'm writing down in the next works, because they do usher in and conjure what comes. And this book had as part of its task to bear witness to a lot of suffering. There's a lot of grief in this book, and I meant for it to be a place for kinds of grief that I didn't think had a place in the culture. And that was a difficult thing to do, and I don't want my next work to be a grieving place, because I've already built one, you know? But I feel that aside from the kind of more like red letter occult things of like tarot decks and crystals and vision quests and rituals and rites, all of which I'm totally with, we don't really understand the mystery of writing still, and we're not taught about it, you know? And I think that for me, that's still the most exciting thing, is like to return myself to that magic. And I guess the last thing I kind of want to say, I'm not sure why I want to say it, but like, I'm not one of those people who's in an ecstatic state all the time. Like, things die for me, or their energy dims, you know? I periodically have to reanimate what I love and myself with energy, with a charge. So I'm saying things lose their charge to me, or I lose my capacity to perceive the charge in things. And I love quoting Sylvia Plath. I can't do, like, even though I'm from Massachusetts, I can't do her particular accent that well, but when she says, there's a charge for the viewing of my scars, a very large charge, you know? And I like to think of that in terms of like electricity. Of course, she's talking about that you're gonna have to pay to view her scars, which is completely legit. There should be a charge. But you also get a charge. And I'm interested in the charge. And I'm interested in the fact that sometimes it dissipates, and other times I'm able to reanimate it and reanimate myself through it. And so I don't want you to think that I'm like walking through the world in some permanently ecstatic and charged state. I die to myself, or I deaden to myself, just as, you know, the light dims sometimes, or whatever. And, but I'm really curious about, and I want to get even more curious about and more interested in how this charge functions, and how just writing down what you write down without quite knowing why, and without needing to understand it yet, how that puts us in contact with dimensions of reality that we wouldn't be able to access with our normal brain. And poetry is such an efficient, portable, cost-effective way into that space. And you can be a complete idiot. You don't even have to, you know, you don't really have to know anything to do it. And I love that. And I think that's very occult as well. It's, you don't, occult in the sense of like the kind of magic that the patricians and the guardians of religion used to shit on. It's like, this is something that people with no power do, you know? And this is something they figured out on their own, and it works. That's the other thing. It's got to work, and we all can have that experience. It doesn't require a special initiation or a special condition of the soul, I think, and that's so wild.
Thank you so much, Ariana.